The content on the Untold Tales channel is protected by copyright. Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. I stood at the edge of the bridge, my hands bound so tightly behind my back that my fingers were beginning to go numb. The wind from the river lashed against my face, soaking my clothes with damp cold, but that was the least of my concerns. Across from me, bathed in the dim glow of the streetlights, stood Billy the man the mafia sent when someone became a problem. Tonight, that problem was me. You understand, Charlie. Billy squinted as he lit a cigarette, exhaling smoke lazily. It could have been different. You chose this path yourself. I smirked, feeling the ropes dig painfully into my wrists. Oh yeah? And what choice did I have? To bow down to you? To let you use my business however you damn well pleased? You're too stubborn, he sighed. The boss doesn't like that. You're a good guy, but a stupid one. I looked at him with pure contempt. Stupid? Because I didn't want your filthy drugs moving through my port? Billy shook his head, taking another drag. You see, Charlie, there's no room for principles in this world. There's only money. And those who don't understand that, well, they end up like this. He nodded toward his men, and one of them stepped forward, gripping a crowbar in his hands. I exhaled slowly, feeling the anger flare inside me. They thought I would just accept my fate? They were so damn wrong. A brutal punch to the stomach knocked the air from my lungs. I doubled over, but the ropes digging into my arms kept me from falling. Another blow this time to the ribs. Something cracked. Maybe a rib. I clenched my teeth but didn't make a sound. Tough bastard, one of Billy's thugs chuckled before slamming his fist into my face. My head snapped back, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. Hold him up straight, Billy ordered lazily. I want him to hear every word. Hands yanked at my hair, forcing my head up. Through blurred vision, I saw Billy take one last drag from his cigarette before flicking the butt at my feet. You think you're dying for your family, huh? So noble. But the truth is, none of them are worth the pain you're going through. I spat blood at his feet. You're rambling. Seems like they didn't hit me hard enough. One of his men drove a knee into my face. The world exploded in pain, and something warm trickled down my lips. Now listen carefully, Charlie. Billy crouched in front of me, his gaze locking onto mine. I want you to leave this world with clarity. I want you to feel the full weight of betrayal. My breathing was ragged, blood dripping onto the concrete. Sheila, your beloved wife, he smirked. She hasn't been spreading her legs for you in a long time. Oh yeah, she was greedy for the good life. She wanted more than you could ever give her. And you know what? I gave it to her. I stared at him, grinding my teeth. The bastard was enjoying this. She's the one who sold us everything about your port. Every detail. How valuable it was, where the weaknesses were. The boss didn't even have to think twice about what to do with you. Rage and pain coursed through me, making my body tremble. You're lying. Oh, Billy chuckled. Am I? No need to ask her now, buddy. While we're having our little chat, she's at my estate, spreading her legs for my guy. I lunged forward, but strong hands forced me back down. Easy there, easy. Billy pressed a finger against my forehead, grinning. But that's not all. He leaned in closer, and his voice dropped to a twisted, sadistic whisper. Your little girl, Rachel. She's a real beauty. Charlie. Fresh. Young. You should be proud. A deep, guttural growl escaped me as I strained against the ropes, every muscle in my body burning with fury. But more fists crashed into me, knocking the fight out of my limbs. Oh yeah, her night is just getting started. And guess who's going to be the first? I lifted my head, locking eyes with him. Me, Charlie. I'll have her first. A punch to the stomach. And when I'm done, a fist to the face. It'll be the boy's turn. My breathing came in sharp gasps, my heart pounding like a war drum. And it'll last. He leaned in, his cold, dead eyes inches from mine from dusk till dawn. He patted my cheek mockingly. Die with that thought, Charlie. Something snapped inside me. But it wasn't my will to live. It was my humanity. I looked into his eyes and knew if I made it out of this. They were all dead. A sharp, searing pain tore through my side as Billy plunged a knife into my flesh, pushing it in slowly, savoring the moment. I let out a ragged breath, feeling the warmth of my own blood spreading across my shirt. There we go, Charlie, he whispered, keeping the blade buried in my gut. Now you definitely won't swim too far. I gritted my teeth, staring him down, refusing to give him the satisfaction of my pain. You, son of a bitch. Billy smirked, yanking the knife free, sending a fresh wave of agony crashing through me. My legs buckled, but his men caught me before I collapsed. Someone yanked my head back by my hair, and I heard the creak of rope tightening. Something rough and heavy settled around my neck. All right, boys, who's taking bets? How long does he last underwater? One of them laughed. With that hole in his side? Not long, another sneered. I felt the weight press down on my shoulders. A rock. Huge, wet, heavy. They had tied it to the rope around my throat. My heart pounded violently, but I remained silent. I wouldn't give them a damn thing. Billy leaned in, adjusting my collar like a friend fixing my tie. I hope, in your last moments, you think about Sheila and what my guy is doing to her right now. Gathering the last of my strength, I spat in his face. His eyes flared with rage. Drop him. The world yanked away. Cold water crashed over me, swallowing my scream, my pain, my breath. The rock dragged me down, its grip like the hand of the devil itself. The water grew dark, my blood turning it murky. I was sinking into the abyss. I was falling, struggling, but with each passing second, I grew heavier. My chest burned, my lungs screamed for air. Darkness. Noise. Time stretched into eternity. But I had no intention of dying. The riverbed was covered in a thick layer of debris. I twisted, feeling my strength ebbing away, but then my fingers brushed against something solid. Iron. An old, rusted piece of metal, jagged, rough. I pressed it against the rope, jerking my hands, fraying the fibers. The stone dragged me down, but I didn't care. My arm weakened, but with the last of my strength, I pulled. A snap. Freedom. I pushed off from the bottom, forcing my way through the murky water, moving as far as possible from the bridge, from those bastards. The dark surface split apart, and I burst into the open air. Air. I drank it in as I swam, keeping my distance from the bridge. Laughter echoed in the distance. Voices carried over the water. They were sure I was dead. Let them think that. For now, I staggered through the shallows, breathing heavily, feeling the mixture of blood and river water leave a faint crimson trail behind me. Every step sent a pulse of pain through my side. My muscles burned from exertion, but I kept moving. There was no other choice. The stone that had been tied around my neck now rested at the bottom of the river, yet the phantom weight of the noose lingered, as if the rope had fused into my skin. Step by step, without looking back, I trudged toward the shore until my feet hit a pile of wet stones, then soft, waterlogged earth, thick with the stench of rot and algae. I collapsed onto it, unable to remain standing. The world around me swam, colors smearing together, sounds muffled as if heard through a thick fog. I tried to lift my head, but my body refused. Blood was leaving me too quickly, and I knew if I closed my eyes now, I might never open them again. But I closed them anyway. I woke to the sharp scent of antiseptic and the muffled beeping of medical equipment. Light stabbed at my eyes, and I squeezed them shut before cautiously blinking again. White ceiling. Overhead lamps. Curtains drawn around a bed. The pain in my side had dulled but remained present. Something was tightly wrapped around my torso. Bandages. I was in a hospital. The moment I processed that thought, the door to the room swung open, and a man in a white coat stepped inside, all with a weary gaze and a stethoscope draped around his neck. "You're finally awake," he said, glancing at me over the rim of his glasses. "You're a lucky man." My lips barely parted, my voice coming out as a hoarse whisper, as if I hadn't spoken in weeks. "How did I get here?" The doctor smirked, shaking his head. "A fisherman found you early this morning, washed up on the shore. Frankly, I'm amazed you made it that far in your condition. He called an ambulance right away. If he hadn't, you wouldn't have stood a chance." I nodded slowly, a creeping sense of unease curling in my gut. If I had been found, then someone could have been alerted, someone who shouldn't be. Thank him for me, but I can't stay here. The doctor raised an eyebrow, folding his arms across his chest. "Oh, of course," he said with light sarcasm. "But I'm afraid you won't be leaving anytime soon." He paused. "The police have a few questions for you." My breath hitched, and I tensed despite the pain. "Police?" The doctor nodded, oblivious to how my fingers curled into a fist beneath the blanket. "Yes. 2 officers are waiting outside. I wouldn't recommend trying to leave." He never finished the sentence. The door opened again, and 2 men in dark suits stepped inside. They looked official, but I knew immediately they weren't cops. Their faces were too hard, their movements too practiced. One shut the door behind him. The other stepped closer, his cold eyes locking onto mine. "Good morning, Charlie," he said, a smirk tugging at his lips. We just came to make sure you're still breathing. He tilted his head. The boss will be pleased to hear that you made it. I stared at him in silence, feeling the slow, simmering burn of rage coil in my gut. They thought they could finish the job right here. They were wrong. The tension in the room thickened with each passing second. These men weren't even pretending to be law enforcement. One of them remained stationed by the door, blocking my escape. The other stood too close to the bed, grinning like he had already won. His hand rested casually in his jacket pocket, no doubt, gripping a gun. "What's the matter, Charlie? Not happy to see us?" His voice dripped with mockery, clearly enjoying the situation. I quickly assessed my chances. My body was weak, but my hands were steady, and in my mind, there was only cold, calculated fury. These bastards had thrown me into the river, left me for dead, and now they came to finish the job. I smiled. I shifted slightly in bed, as if adjusting myself for comfort. The doctor stood nearby, tense, sensing that something was off, but not understanding what. I turned my head toward him, and, in a weak voice, muttered, "Doc, help me with my pillow, it's too high." The doctor instinctively reached out to adjust it. That was all the distraction I needed. With a burst of energy, I tore the pillow from under my head and lunged forward, slamming it over the bastard's face. He barely had time to react. His hands flailed, grasping for his weapon, but I was on top of him, pressing down with every ounce of strength I had left. His muffled screams filled the air as he thrashed beneath me, his oxygen supply dwindling. The second man reacted instantly, reaching for his gun, but I was faster. I grabbed the metal forestand beside my bed and swung it like a club, driving it straight into his throat. Blood sprayed across the white sheets. His eyes bulged as he choked, clutching at his ruined windpipe, gasping for air that would never come. The first man was still struggling, but his movements grew weaker, more frantic. I pushed harder, feeling his body convulse beneath me. His desperate grasping slowed, then stopped. Silence. I stood, breathing heavily, looking down at the two corpses. They thought they had me cornered. They had no idea. The doctor stood in the corner, pale as a sheet. I lifted my gaze to him, breathing heavily. "You didn't see anything. Document forget this ever happened." He nodded frantically, backing toward the door. I didn't waste any time. I stripped a jacket and pants off one of the dead men, checking the pockets, a wallet, a wad of cash, a mobile phone. Everything I needed. My movements were swift and precise despite the weakness. Adrenaline pushed me forward. I pulled the stolen clothes over my hospital gown, tucked the gun beneath the jacket, and, with one last glance at the motionless bodies, headed for the exit. The doctor stood frozen against the wall, and as I passed, I murmured quietly, "If there's any noise here in 10 minutes, I'll come back." His head jerked in a frantic nod, but he didn't say a word. I slipped into the corridor, walking with confidence, as if I were just another visitor or a doctor making his rounds. No one paid me any attention, and if they did, they didn't suspect a thing. There was only one thing left: getting out of the hospital before someone realized those two weren't just taking a nap in my room. I made my way to the exit, gripping the stolen phone in my pocket. Now I needed information. Who else was involved? Where was Sheila? And most importantly, where was my daughter? I had made myself a promise every last one of them would pay. I walked out of the hospital as if nothing had happened, suppressing the pain in my side and focusing on the only thing that mattered: moving fast. They were already looking for me. They thought they had finished the job, but fate had given me a second chance, and I intended to use it. I turned a corner, rifling through the pockets of the dead bastard's jacket. The phone was cheap, no passwords, just a disposable burner used for dirty business. Perfect. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, but had never forgotten. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Speak," a low, raspy voice answered. I smirked, a familiar warmth of old memories washing over me. "Tommy, you old bastard, miss me?" Silence. Then I heard him inhale sharply. "Charlie?" There was tension in his voice. "I heard you were dead." Almost was, but I guess death changed its mind. "I've got problems, Tommy. Big ones. And I need the team." A few more seconds of silence, then a heavy exhale. "Who?" "Everyone. Whoever's left." "Shit." Tommy went quiet, but I knew he was already working things out in his head. "All right. I'll get them. Where do we meet?" I closed my eyes, picturing the place as clearly as the scars on my hands. The old sawmill on the north edge of town. Tonight. 11 o'clock. "Got it. Be there." Tommy hung up, and I slowly tucked the phone back into my pocket. Now all I had to do was get there. The team won. Tommy Sin Grayson, a former Marine, our close-quarters fighter. A legend among mercenaries, ruthless, fast, and deadly. His fists hit like hammers, and his will was forged in steel. 2. Rick Shadow Morrison, our scout, tracker, and sniper. He can disappear into the darkness and take out a target from a mile away. Speaks only when necessary. 3. Jake Doc Sanders, a former combat medic, but much more than that. An expert in interrogation and torture. He knows how to pull the truth from a man, even if that man thought he could keep his mouth shut. 4. Lucas Boom Wilson, heavy weapons and explosives specialist. Loves big guns and even bigger explosions. If given a choice between talking and shooting, he always chooses the latter. 5. Vince Ghost Carter, a former intelligence agent, master of electronics, hacking, and forgery. If you need to disappear or make someone else vanish, he's the one to call. I set off toward the sawmill, knowing that soon we would all be together again. Not as brothers in arms, not as ex-soldiers, but as executioners. I arrived at the sawmill a little early. The place was abandoned, rotten, reeking of old wood and rusted metal. No one had set foot here in years, making it the perfect meeting spot. I stepped inside, moving slowly, checking my corners, listening for every sound. The pain in my chest still pulsed, but it was nothing compared to the fire burning inside meth hatred, the thirst for revenge, the need to take back what was mine. Footsteps. The first to arrive was Tommy Sin Grayson, all solid, with graying temples and eyes carved from stone. He hadn't changed. "You look like shit, Charlie," he said flatly, scanning me from head to toe. "You're not looking any younger yourself, old man." He smirked, clapped me on the shoulder, and we embraced. The others followed. Rick Shadow Morrison moved like a wraith, silent as death. Jake Doc Sanders rolled up his sleeves, tattoos curling around his forearms, his sharp gaze settling on my bandaged side. Lucas Boom Wilson chewed on a toothpick, looking like he was just waiting for an excuse to blow something up. Vince Ghost Carter, as always, had the look of a man who could vanish at any moment if he wanted to. We stood in a circle, no words at first. Then Tommy spoke. "Talk." I took a deep breath. "Billy's crew. They tried to use my port for drug shipments." I said no. The boss didn't like that. So they sent men. Tied me up, beat me, stabbed me, threw me into the river with a rock tied to my neck. Boom snorted. "Judging by the fact that you're standing here, that rock didn't do its job." "I got out," I said coldly. "But before I did, Billy told me something." My fists clenched as I tried to keep the fury in check. He was screwing my wife. And then she sold me out. Silence. The air in the room shifted. Shadow's breathing stopped. Boom's knuckles whitened as he clenched his fists. Doc muttered a curse under his breath. Ghost shook his head. Tommy exhaled through gritted teeth. "Those bastards are dead." "Yeah," I nodded. "But first, I need to find Rachel." "Then we need intel," Ghost said, ever the strategist. "What do we have?" I pulled out the phone I had taken from the thug at the hospital and tossed it to Vince. "One of theirs. See what you can pull." Ghost sat down on an old crate and got to work. "They're not idiots, Charlie," Doc said, glancing at my wound. "You've got a couple of days before you drop if we don't handle that properly." "I don't have a couple of days." Doc nodded once. "Then we move fast." Boom clapped his hands together. "We need someone to squeeze for answers." "Any idea where to start?" I looked at Tommy. "Billy still keeping fighters?" "Yeah. He's got a club, the Red Serpent, out on the south side. They run underground fights, launder money through it." "Then that's where we start," I said. Ghost looked up from the phone. "Good news, Charlie. There are a few unread messages here. One from a guy named Frankie. Boss wants the shipment at the warehouse by midnight." "What warehouse?" Ghost tapped the screen a few times. "Got an address." "Doc, you like Riverside?" Doc smirked. "Love the smell of cheap vodka and rotting garbage." Tommy looked around at the group. "Two lead the club and the warehouse." I nodded slowly. "We need answers. I want to know where Billy is and where my daughter is." They backed me into a corner, tried to kill me, took everything. I looked at each of them. Now they learn what it means to make me their enemy. Tommy grinned. "Then let's start the hunt." Boom took the door first. One solid shoulder slam, and the heavy metal, rusted at the hinges, gave way, swinging open with a groan. At that exact moment, I stepped forward, pressing the silencer of my pistol against the tipple of the guard at the entrance. Sweet dreams. A muffled shot, and he collapsed like a sack of shit. The second guard barely managed to reach for his holster, but Shadow was faster as knife flashed in the dim light, slicing clean through the man's throat in one swift, practiced motion. The place was packet smoke-filled, stinking of sweat and blood. In the center, two fighters were tearing each other apart in the ring while the crowd roared, placing bets. We entered slowly, like a pack of wolves, and then Doc fired a shot into the ceiling, shattering one of the lights. Faces on the fucking floor, while you still have them. The crowd erupted, some ran, some reached for weapons, and some were too drunk to understand what was happening. Move. Tommy barked, and the carnage began. I vaulted over a table, slamming a chair into the face of a fighter who had reached for a knife. He went down hard. I turned and fired a burst into three men pulling guns. Boom grabbed the nearest thug by the throat and, with terrifying ease, dragged him forward before smashing his face into the bar counter. A sickening crunch of breaking bones, and the bastard wasn't getting up again. Shadow moved through the chaos like death itself, cutting throats with quiet precision. His movements were smooth, silent predator in the dark. I ripped a knife from someone's grip, twisted his wrist at an unnatural angle, and drove the blade deep into his thigh. His scream cut through the music. Doc picked off those trying to escape, toppling bottles from shelves as he went, covering the floor in shattered glass and spilled alcohol, turning it into a slippery death trap. Within minutes, it was over. A place that had been filled with laughter and thrill-seeking moments ago now looked more like a slaughterhouse. Interrogation, getting to the good part. We dragged one of the survivors to the bar counter. He was a tough bastard, bloodied face, split lip, but his eyes still burned with defiance. "You assholes have no idea who you just fucked with," he spat, sending a bloody glob at my feet. I smirked, picking up a bottle of cheap whiskey from the bar. "You're right," I nodded. "But you, my friend, are about to find out exactly who you fucked with." I lifted the bottle and smashed it over his head. Shards rained down, blood dripped down his face, but he still glared at me. Boom sat down next to him, his massive hand landing heavily on the guy's shoulder. "You see, pal, we don't have time for games. We need answers. Go to hell." I sighed and turned to document. "Remember that little thing with the knife?" Doc grinned, pulling out a folding blade and flicking it open with an almost lazy motion. "Oh, I never forget the classics." We stretched out the bastard's hand, pressing it against the bar. "You've got 10 seconds to tell us where Billy is," I said evenly, "or we start cutting fingers." Despite the pain, he laughed. "Cut the whole damn hand off for all I care." I shrugged. "Doc?" Without hesitation, Doc pressed the blade to his pinky and, without warning, drove it straight into the joint. The bastard howled, his body convulsing, but Tommy held him in place. "That was just one," I said calmly. 9 seconds. "Fuck you." Doc peeled back the skin slowly, then with one quick motion, sliced the finger down to the bone. A scream tore through the air, but I remained indifferent. 8 seconds. He twitched, his teeth grinding together, but still, he kept silent. I picked up a shard of the broken bottle, rolling it in my palm. "You do realize where this is going, don't you?" His breathing turned ragged. All right. He gasped. "I don't know where he is, I swear. He's gone off the grid, scared you'd come after him." I clenched my jaw. "Then give me something useful." "The stash." He spat out. "The warehouse in Riverside. That's where all the bosses keep their money." I raised a brow, glancing at Tommy. Well? Boom chuckled, clapping me on the back. "Shit, if we burn their cash, this whole city is gonna turn into a goddamn war zone." I turned back to our prisoner. "Thanks for the tip. Now let me go." "Yeah?" I shook my head. "Are you serious?" Before he could even process what was happening, Boom twisted his head sharply. A sick snap, and it was over. We gathered weapons, checked our ammo. Now we had a new target. Riverside. The warehouse. And a fire that would turn the mafia's money into ashes. We arrived at the warehouse deep into the night. The place was well guarded. This was where the local crime lords kept their money, and they couldn't afford to let just anyone walk in and clean them out. "At least 10 men inside," Shadow whispered, scanning the area through his thermal scope. "What's the plan, Charlie?" Tommy asked, adjusting his gloves. I smirked, checking the rounds in my magazine. "In 10 minutes, the only thing left here will be corpses." "Then let's get to work," Boom nodded, already pulling explosives from his pack. The first blast rocked the building. Boom had blown the back entrance, sending the guards rushing toward the explosion. That was our cue. We entered through the front. I dropped the first guard with a bullet to the head. The second barely had time to process what was happening before Shadow slit his throat so fast he collapsed without a sound. Boom wasn't subtle as shotgun tore through bodies, sending them crashing onto crates overflowing with cash. At this rate, there won't be anyone left to talk, Tommy noted as he put another guard in the ground with a clean shot. And why the hell would I need them? Boom scoffed, reloading. We carved a path through the warehouse, leaving a trail of blood in our wake, until we reached the upstairs office. Boom kicked the door in. Inside, 3 men were waiting, one with a gun, 2 with knives. Doc moved first, flicking his wrist. His knife found its mark, burying deep into the shooter's hand, sending his gun skidding across the floor. I stepped forward and put a bullet in one of the knife wielders. Tommy snapped the second one's neck. The last guy tried to run, but Boom caught him, slamming his face into the desk. "Where you running off to, buddy?" Boom grinned, twisting his arm behind his back. "We've got some questions for you." We tied the bastard to a chair right there in the office, the air still thick with the stench of gunpowder and blood. Doc sat across from him, smiling lazily. "Tell me, pal, do you like sushi?" The captive breathed heavily, his eyes darting around. "W what?" Doc pulled out his knife, slowly tracing the blade along the man's cheek. "I've always admired Japanese chefs. Ever seen how they slice fish? Fast, thin, precise." "Go to hell," the man spat, blood trickling from his lips. Doc sighed. "Now, why be so rude?" He leaned down and made the first shallow cut across the captive's thigh. "Oh, fuck," the man screamed, arching against the restraints. Doc squinted, as if critiquing his own work. "A little uneven. First try's always rough." I crossed my arms. "Listen, I really don't want him turning you into an appetizer. So let's start simple. Where's Billy?" "Screw you." Doc nodded. "Okay." Another cut, slightly deeper this time, peeling a thin layer of skin away. "Now this," Doc mused, admiring the exposed flesh. "This is starting to look like sashimi. Don't you think?" The captive thrashed, screaming, but none of us felt the slightest sympathy. "You can end this right now," I said quietly. "Just tell us where he is." "Shit, all right." "All right," he shouted. "Billy's holed up at his safe house. Out of town. Address 14th mile, Old Farm." I nodded. "Good boy." Doc grinned. "See? No need for dessert. Now tell me where Rachel is," I said, leaning in to watch his fear up close. His teeth clenched, body shaking from pain, but I saw it knew. "Where is she?" "The bosses, they plan to keep her as leverage, but one of them, he coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "He took her." "Name?" Tommy growled. "Carlos. Carlos Mendoza. He took her to his villa outside the city." A slow, burning rage spread through my chest. "Where exactly?" "Shit. Old Canyon. Up on the hill, big estate. He's always got guards." "That's enough," I said. Doc wiped his knife on the man's shirt. "So, do we let him go?" Boom chuckled. "Yeah, straight to hell." I didn't hesitate when shot to the head, and it was over. We exchanged glances. "What now?" Tommy asked. I clenched my fists. "First, we burn this goddamn warehouse and leave them broke. Then, we go get my daughter." Boom grinned. "Well then, time to light the fire." Minutes later, the warehouse was ablaze, and we stood watching as millions of dollars turned to ash. This was only the first step in our revenge. We walked out, leaving a trail of blood and the useless corpse of the man we had interrogated. Outside, the air was thick with the groans of the dying and the stench of gunpowder, blood, and fear. "Boom," I said without looking back. "Light it up." "Oh, this is gonna be beautiful," he chuckled, pulling out several C4 charges from his pack. But before we could put on the fireworks, we had one last thing to do. We made our way to the central storage room, where rows of towering metal shelves held crates stuffed with cash. Bills littered the floor. Some of the guards had tried to grab what they could before dying, but bullets had stopped them before their pockets were full. In the corner, 2 guards cowered like rats. "No, no, no, please." One of them shrieked, raising bloodied hands. I put a bullet in his forehead without breaking stride. The second tried to run, but Boom put a shotgun blast into his back, sending him sprawling. "No backbone, these guys," Tommy muttered, nudging a corpse with his boot. "That's because they hide behind money," I replied, picking up a handful of $100 bills and squeezing them in my fist. "And now, their money burns with them." Ghost was already working on the security system, locking down all exits. "Leaving one way out for us," he muttered, tapping away at the keys. "You're generous today," Shadow smirked. Boom was already moving through the warehouse, planting charges with a boyish grin. "This place is a goddamn national bank," he chuckled, wedging C4 beneath a shelving unit. "I'd love to take a couple stacks, but—" He flicked open his lighter and tossed it into a pile of loose bills. Flames erupted instantly, licking hungrily at the stacks of cash. I like watching them burn more. Screams. I turned. The last surviving guards were trying to escape through a side corridor, but they ran straight into Shadow. With one fluid motion, he slit the throat of the closest one, and without stopping, drove his knife into the next man's eye socket. Doc was finishing off the wounded, methodically, without rush, putting the final punctuation marks on their lives. The money burned higher, flames licking at the wooden beams overhead. The gasoline-soaked bodies began to smolder. I took a step back, admiring the hellish scene. "All right, boys, time to go," Tommy reminded us as the fire roared, consuming the walls. We moved outside, watching as the warehouse became a blazing torch. Heat scorched our faces, and flames shot into the night sky, painting it red. They thought money was power. We showed them that their power burned just as easily as they did. But this was only the beginning. I looked at my team, the fire reflecting in their eyes. "Now for Rachel." They nodded silently. And once again, the night filled with the promise of blood. The night was dark, but that didn't matter to us. We arrived at Carlos Mendoza's villa just past midnight, when his guards were at their most relaxed, convinced they were safe. They didn't know death was already standing at their doorstep. 6 guards patrolling the perimeter, at least 10 more inside, Rick Shadow whispered, peering through his thermal scope. "Rachel's somewhere in the house, possibly in the basement." "Move in," I ordered, chambering around. "No plan?" Tommy smirked. "Simple plan," Boom grinned, screwing on a suppressor. "We kill everyone standing between Charlie and his daughter." "Damn, I love this job," Doc chuckled. We moved like ghosts, silent, invisible. The first guard never even knew he was dead. Shadow slipped up behind him and slid a knife clean into his throat, lowering the body gently onto the grass. The second heard the gurgle but didn't turn fast enough. My blade slid up under his ribs, puncturing a lung. "Two down," I whispered. We moved on. Boom took 3 using only his bare hands. He snapped the first one's neck, slammed the second's head into a stone wall, and strangled the third, his body thrashing in its final death spasms. The last one fell to Doak, a quick silenced shot, and the perimeter was clear. Now for the house. We slipped inside. Lights were on, music was playing, drunken laughter echoed through the halls. They suspected nothing. "Let's get started," Tommy smirked. I stepped in first, blowing the head off the nearest bastard with a single shot. Boom lobbed a grenade into the next room. 3 men were shredded in an instant. The rest panicked. "We're under attack." I sidestepped an incoming burst of gunfire and fired twice. One man clutched his throat, choking on his own blood. Another staggered with a gut wound, but it was already too late for him. Shadow moved like death itself. His blade worked faster than bullets, slicing tendons, opening bellies. Doc grabbed one by the hair and smashed his face into the tiled floor, breaking his nose. "Where's the girl?" he growled. No answer. I seized another, slamming him against the wall and pressing my gun against his eye socket. "Where is my daughter?" "Why, you bastard?" he choked out. I pulled the trigger, splattering his brains across the wallpaper. "Anyone else want to play the hero?" I roared. "The basement." "The basement? Fuck." One of the survivors shrieked. I didn't hesitate. 1 bullet to his knee, and he collapsed, screaming. "You were useful. Now die." I ended him quickly and bolted downstairs, not waiting for the others. The basement door was locked. I didn't care. 1 precise shot into the lock, and I kicked it open. Rachel sat in the corner, tied to a chair, her face bruised, her eyes wide with terror. "Dad," she whispered. "It's okay, baby." I quickly cut the ropes. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "They hit me, but I didn't break." They didn't get to do anything. They wanted to keep me for something worse. "They said you were dead." They were wrong. I held her tighter. "Mendoza, meeting the devil." "Ah, Charlie." I lifted my head. Carlos Mendoza stood in the doorway, grinning. "You're alive." Impressive. I handed Rachel off to Shadow and slowly stood. "You took my daughter." My voice was quiet, but dripping with murder. "It was just business, friend." He spread his arms. "But it seems you don't understand. I shot him in the leg." He screamed, dropping to the floor. Please, he gasped. But I was already walking toward him. I crouched down, pressing my gun to his forehead. Billy, where is he? Mendoza wheezed, his eyes darting wildly. He's hiding, an old hangar, out in the wastelands beyond the city. I swear. You swear? I slowly lowered my gun and pulled out my knife. You know what your men reminded me of, Mendoza? He coughed, trying to crawl away. They said, you love sushi. I dragged the blade across his cheek. He screamed, let's see how you taste. I cut again his shoulder, then his arm. He howled, writhing, but I didn't stop. Please, please. I laughed. Did you say please when you put your hands on my daughter? I grabbed him by the hair, lifted his head, and drove my knife into his gut, twisting slowly. You know the difference between us, Mendoza? Blood gurgled in his throat as his body trembled. I don't do this for fun. I slashed his throat. Blood sprayed my face. I didn't even blink. I do it for justice. I stood, wiping the knife on his clothes, and turned to Tommy. We take Rachel and go. Tomorrow, we go for Billy. Tommy glanced at Mendoza's corpse and nodded. That was beautiful, brother. I took my daughter's hand. Let's go home, sweetheart. But I knew there was only one place that could be home for us now, where Billy would be dead. Rachel was safe. We took her to an old friend, a man who knew honor and never asked questions. Now, only one thing remained. Billy. I sat in the dark room, staring at the phone. Billy's number. I had taken it from Mendoza, right before sending him to hell. Boom and Doc sat nearby, cleaning their weapons. Shadow silently watched the perimeter, while Tommy sipped his whiskey, waiting for the show to begin. I pressed the call button. The dial tone dragged on. I pictured Billy staring at the screen, recognizing the number, realizing that hell was already knocking at his door. Charlie. Billy's voice was hoarse, tense. He knew exactly who was calling. Oh, you recognize me? I'm touched. I knew you survived. I smirked. Yeah, your boys tried to fix that at the hospital. Didn't go so well. Silence. I could hear his breathing. He was nervous. Listen, let's not do anything stupid, Charlie. Oh, you want to keep things reasonable? I chuckled. Let's think about that. Your money? Gone. Your men? Dead. Mendoza? Well, let's just say he's got a bit of a leaking problem now. What? I imagined him gripping the phone, sweat beading on his forehead, his world crumbling around him. The boss won't be happy, Billy. What do you have left? Oh, wait, just your pathetic life. You want money? Guns? Women? He stammered, his words slurring together in panic. We can make a deal. Money? I scoffed. Billy, you idiot. What money? It burned down with your warehouse and your friends. Charlie, let's not turn this into some meaningless vendetta, all right? He tried to keep his voice steady, but I could hear the tremor. Billy, you're supposed to be the guy who fixes problems, right? So tell me, how are you fixing this one? Silence. Oh, wait, I know. You tried to kill me, tied me up, tortured me, threw me in a river with a rock around my neck. Beautiful. Efficient. Except, I let the pause hang in the air. The problem, Billy, is that now I'm the problem. Look, I can help. I can. I can tell you where the boss is, where the rest of the money is. I can make you disappear. A slow grin spread across my face. Disappear? Oh, Billy, you're funny. No, you are the one who's going to disappear. Charlie, don't do this. I leaned closer to the phone and whispered, I'm already on my way. The line went dead. I looked at my team. Time to finish this. Boom grinned, screwing on his suppressor. Time to roast Billy. I knew it. I heard it in his voice, in the way his words trembled, in the way he tried to bargain, drowning in panic, clinging to the illusion that there was a way out. But there wasn't. He was trying to figure out who I was. He pulled strings, made calls, searched for files. But his people found nothing. My past was scorched, erased, wiped clean like I had never existed. And that terrified him. He was used to dealing with predictable men, gangsters, businessmen, cops. They all left a trail. They all had weaknesses. But I was a ghost. He threw me in the river, and I crawled out. I burned his money. I slaughtered his men. And now I was coming for him. He had no idea who he was dealing with. But soon he would. We arrived deep into the night. Billy had holed up in an old hangar out in the wasteland, surrounded by what was left of his crew. They weren't preparing for a fight. They were preparing to survive one. 20 men guarding the place, Shadow whispered, scanning through his binoculars. Machine guns, fortified positions, rocket launchers. They're panicking, Doc noted. They're not waiting for us. They're afraid of us. And they should be, Boom grinned, checking his detonator. I watched the hangar. Billy was inside. My heartbeat was steady, unwavering. We go in, cut them down, take Billy, I said calmly. Just another day at work, Tommy smirked. We moved in. The first guards never even knew what hit them. Shadow took down 2 with his knife so quickly their bodies crumpled before they could make a sound. I flanked left, lined up my sights 3 shots, 3 men down before they could lift their weapons. Boom lobbed a grenade into the watchtower. The explosion lit up the night, screams echoing into the darkness. Move in. We advanced across the open ground. Machine gun fire ripped through the air, forcing us to dive behind crates. Flanking fire, I ordered. Tommy and Doc swept wide, cutting off their angles. I rushed forward, drawing my knife, and drove it deep into a guard's neck. I yanked him in front of me, using his body as a shield before putting down the rest of his squad. Blood painted the dirt, the scent of gunpowder thick in the air, mixing with the agonized screams of the dying. Entry clear. Moving inside. We stormed into the hangar. Billy stood in the center, shaking, flanked by the last of his men. Charlie, his voice was dry, stripped of confidence. Billy. I shook my head, gripping my pistol. So, did you fix your problems? He pulled a gun, but he never even got to aim. I shot first. His arm jerked back, the gun clattering to the ground as he howled, clutching his bullet-riddled shoulder. No more guards. No more money. The boss has probably written you off already. I stepped closer, slow, deliberate. You're all alone now, aren't you, Billy? He collapsed at his knees, cradling his bloody arm. Charlie, he choked. Please. Please? I laughed. Is that what you told my wife when you were screwing her? Is that what you told my daughter before you handed her over to your dogs? His body trembled. I was just following orders. Billy crawled on the floor, drowning in his own fear. No more pretending. No more bargaining. He knew this was the end. I stepped forward, my breath steady after the carnage. Blood dripped from my fingers, but none of it was mine. Charlie, he wheezed, dragging himself toward the wall, his hands shaking, eyes darting for any escape. I crouched in front of him, tilting my head, savoring the moment. So, Billy, how's that problem-solving going? He didn't answer. I grabbed his chin, forcing him to look at me. You tied me up, stabbed me, threw me in a river, thinking I'd just disappear. I let go. He groaned, collapsing back onto the floor. You gave my wife to your men. You were going to let my daughter be torn apart by bastards like you. I stood, walked to a rusted metal rod, and gripped it tightly. I was supposed to be dead, right? I swung. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the hangar. Billy screamed. His leg bent at an unnatural angle. Oh, that hurt? I sneered, swinging again. The other leg shattered. He sobbed, writhing, but I wasn't done. I felt pain too, Billy. When your men beat me, I brought the rod down on his arm, snapping the elbow backward. And when you drove that knife into me. Another swing, his shoulder crumpled, turning to pulp. He wasn't even screaming anymore, just ragged, gurgling gasps. I knelt beside him, yanking his head up by his hair, forcing him to look at me through tears and blood. Now you're nothing, Billy. Just a sack of broken bones. I pulled out a flask, unscrewed the cap, and poured whiskey over his clothes. You know what pisses me off the most? I flicked my lighter open, rolling the flame between my fingers. You actually thought I'd disappear. I let the fire catch his eyes. You were wrong. The fire ignited instantly, racing across his alcohol-soaked clothes, consuming his body. Billy convulsed, his broken limbs jerking in spasms as a final, doomed scream tore from his throat. I watched as the flames devoured him, turning his flesh to cinders, his cries fading until only the hiss of burning skin remained. The fire died down, leaving nothing but a smoldering heap of ashes and charred bones. I turned to my team. It's done. Boom snorted, glancing at the remains. Yeah, now it is. Shadow adjusted his gloves. The boss probably knows by now. I smirked. Good. Let him wait. The night wasn't over yet. Billy was dead. I watched his body burn, but inside, there was no satisfaction. The job wasn't finished. This whole chain of filth didn't exist without its key player. The one pulling the strings. The one signing the orders. The one who thought he had the right to control other people's lives. Martin Cross. A respected man. A powerful official. A politician with a spotless reputation. The kind the public saw on their screens, smiling, saying the right words, cutting ribbons at school openings. But behind that smile lurked a real monster. He was the one who had given Billy the green light. The one who saw my port as his new trafficking network. The one who decided my daughter was just another commodity. Now, he was the last name on my list. And I was already waiting for him. Martin Cross's house was a mansion. 3 stories in a gated community, armed guards, cameras, top-of-the-line security. None of it mattered. I cut through his guards like a knife through butter. No one even heard them die. Some went asleep with their throats slit. Others had the lights shut off in their skulls with a single bullet. Now, I sat in his office, hidden in the dark. Footsteps. Cross emerged from the shower, humming some classical tune under his breath. A towel draped around his neck, an expensive robe hanging off his shoulders, his hair still damp. He walked right past me, straight to his bar, pouring himself a whiskey. I waited for him to take the first sip. Long day? He froze. The glass trembled in his hand. He didn't turn around right away, but I saw the shiver run down his spine. Who's there? I leaned back in the chair, letting the glow of the desk lamp illuminate me. Sit down, Martin. His face twisted in fear. Charlie. You know who I am. That saves time. He swallowed hard. Listen. I don't know what you've been told, but all of this is a mistake. A mistake? I tilted my head. The mistake was ordering my execution. The mistake was sending your people after my daughter. The mistake was thinking you could stay clean. He tried to keep his composure. Charlie, let's be reasonable. I have money. Connections. I can give you anything you want. I smirked. The only thing I want is your heart in my hand. He paled. You're not a killer. You were a businessman, a family man. You won't do this. I stood up slowly. A family man. Yeah, I was. Until you turned my life to ashes. Now, I'm no businessman, no family man. I am judge, jury, and executioner. He stumbled back, hitting the desk. What are you going to do? I smiled. You like control, don't you, Martin? Giving orders, watching people follow your will? I tossed a pair of handcuffs onto the floor in front of him. Put them on. Charlie, put them on. His hands trembled as he locked the cuffs around his wrists. Good boy, I said, pulling out my knife. He swallowed. Why the knife? I heard you have a taste for fine dining, Martin. Exotic delicacies. Did you know the human heart keeps beating for a few seconds after it's removed? His eyes widened in horror. Charlie, please. I grabbed him by the hair and slammed his face into the desk. Pray to God. Not to me. I tore his robe open, exposing his chest. Have you ever seen a heart being taken out, Martin? I think it'll be an interesting experience. He struggled, but the cuffs held him down. I lifted the knife. Don't worry. I'll do it slowly, so you can feel it. His scream shattered the night. When I walked out of his house, his blood was still on my hands. I pulled out my phone and dialed. Tommy answered immediately. It's done? I stared at the quiet city streets, at the peaceful night. Now it is. Where to now? I exhaled, feeling relief for the first time in a long while. Home. The city was unfamiliar, but that didn't matter. I sat in a dark apartment on the 6th floor, binoculars in hand. From my window, I had a perfect view of the hotel across the street. There, on the 5th floor, she sat. Sheila, my wife, my ex-wife. Blonde, perfectly styled hair, wrapped in a silk robe, a glass of wine in hand. She looked relaxed, but I knew she was afraid. Afraid that I would find her. And she was right. I pulled out my phone and dialed. The dial tone rang on the other end. Through the binoculars, I saw her flinch as her phone vibrated on the table. She glanced at the screen, and the color drained from her face. She pressed answer, but didn't speak right away. Charlie? I smiled, keeping my eyes on her through the lens. Hello, darling. She swallowed nervously, her eyes darting around the room. How did you find me? Sweetheart, you know me. When I start something, I finish it. Did you really think I'd forget about you? Charlie, please. Oh, now you're polite? I chuckled. You weren't like this when you were screwing Billy and feeding him information. When you sold out my port. When you betrayed me and our daughter. It's not like that. Her voice trembled. They forced me. Really? I leaned forward. So they tied you up? Beat you? Threatened you? Or did you just enjoy your new, expensive life? Silence. That's what I thought. No one forced you. You made a choice, Sheila. You chose the dark side. She sobbed. Charlie, I made a mistake. But you loved me once, didn't you? Can't you give me a chance? I smirked. I did love you. Once. But now? Now I'm just closing the last chapter. What do you mean? At that moment, her door burst open, and uniformed officers stormed in. Police. Get on the floor. Hands behind your head. She shrieked, the wine glass slipping from her fingers and shattering against the floor. What? This has to be a mistake. The officers wrestled her down, locking cuffs around her wrists. Sheila Cross, you are under arrest for involvement in criminal activities, money laundering, conspiracy with organized crime. She trembled, her face flushing with sheer panic. Charlie, what did you do? I smirked, watching as they dragged her away. I just helped you accept the consequences. She kept screaming, but I had already ended the call. Now, it was truly over. A week later, Rachel and I stood on the shore, watching the waves crash against the white sand. It's beautiful here, Dad, she smiled, wrapping her arms around me. I inhaled the fresh ocean air, feeling the weight of the past finally lift from my shoulders. Yeah, sweetheart, I said, holding her close. It is. I didn't know how long this peace would last. But one thing I knew for damn sure, I would never let anyone take away what I love again.